With a flip of her silver hair, Olga Marie left the room. After waiting for the door to close completely, Trisha turned to my master.
I would like to ask you one thing, if possible.
And what would that be?
My master believes you are intending to join the Fifth Holy Grail War just to redeem your honor, but I believe that's not quite right.
Oh? What makes you think that?
At my master's prodding, Trisha gave a faint smile as she whispered.
It is hardly uncommon for someone who overcomes a life-or-death battle to have a complete change of personality, but even for that, a chance is needed. If the previous Lord El-Melloi didn't provide that for you, it must have been someone else. I looked over the results of the survey on the Holy Grail War, and I know of the heroic spirit you fought alongside in the Fourth Holy Grail War 10 years ago.
My master's fingers jerked as if surprised. Coles and I both held our breath, because Trisha so perfectly described the real reason we had come to the Rail Zeppelin. The attendant continued to speak softly.
Yes, a heroic spirit that had carved their mark into human history would be more than enough to spark that sort of complete change in someone.
It was like ice stabbing me in the back. Mystic eyes of foresight, she claimed, and she showed us that power, but I felt like there was an even greater power of discernment hidden behind those eyes.
An interesting piece of conjecture, miss. But in the end, it's just conjecture. It doesn't seem like you have any evidence to back that up.
Of course not, so please accept this question for the conjecture that it is.
With that preface, she continued,
Should you summon that heroic spirit, that servant, once more? What if that servant had no memories of the time spent with you?
Huh? The dumb-sounding voice blurting out was mine. Though I had tried to keep it in the entire time, I couldn't help but let that one slip out. With a short glance toward me, Trisha continued.
Due to my study into necromancy, I have a small amount of knowledge regarding heroic spirits. Of course, the true heroic spirit engraved on the throne of heroes certainly has knowledge of the time spent with you. Neither time nor space exists at the throne, so the records of heroic spirits recorded there must be immense. However, for that reason, when servants are summoned into this world, those records are not summoned with them. The knowledge servants possess consists only of their memories of life, plus knowledge granted to them by the world required to operate in the present era. Beyond that are only a few small modifications. As the Throne of Heroes records all things regardless of time, if that knowledge wasn't stripped from them, any number of paradoxes could result.
Of course, that's all just a theory, she stipulated with the smile of a shark.
theory.
My feet suddenly felt unstable. It felt like trying to build something, only to find out you were wrong from the very first step. I felt like the carpet might split open, dropping me straight into hell. If I didn't keep a tight rein on my feelings now, I was sure I'd collapse.
Yes, it's just a theory, but what if there were exceptions to it? For example, memories from within a singularity completely split off from every and all timelines, or from within reality marbles completely isolated from the rest of the world. Unless such conditions could be met, wouldn't your dream be impossible?
My master said nothing. He just narrowed his eyes, as if staring into a strong wind.
Or perhaps you intend to entirely change the summoning formula. If so, you would need to create an entirely new greater grail on which the whole process is based. Certainly an undertaking fitting for the title of Lord. No, it would be easier just to steal Fuyuki's. Doesn't that sound just like what a magus would do?
It surprises me that Animosphere is interested in this at all.
My master's voice was quiet. That made it all the more painful to listen to. I wanted him to be surprised. I wanted him to be hurt. I wanted him to scream and shout that something like that was impossible. But my master just sat calmly, as if he had known everything Trisha had just said since long ago, whether he liked it or not.
Allow me to ask one more question. The words rainbow mystic eyes can include any number of possibilities. What kind of rainbow mystic eyes did you see, exactly?
For a moment, Trisha narrowed her eyes behind her glasses. Then she shook her head.
I don't think there is any need for me to explain that much. Even if it's the Rail Zeppelin, I can't imagine them selling 2 sets of rainbow-ranked mystic eyes at once, after all.
I see. That sounds reasonable.
With a bitter smile, my master let off. His usual smile, as if he was still troubled by something, though it seems she may have seen something in that expression.
Mr. El-Melloi II. Humans are creatures that depend on information to live, yet are bound by that information until they die. Vision is the sense that acquires the greatest amount of information. As such, possessing mystic eyes means accepting being bound by them. Should you seek to acquire mystic eyes besides the ones we are after, I would implore you to think deeply on that.
I appreciate your warning.
With that, the attendant left us. Once the door shut, I immediately spoke. Master. In response to my shaking voice, my master paused before turning to me. Though I did my best to hide it, he may have still seen the tears in my eyes. The words she had left behind had left such scars. Facing that, my master spoke with an incredibly complicated expression.
Did Rainey's tell you something about me and the Holy Grail War?
No. But that.
That servants don't remember their previous summonings? I am a lord, you know. I've been researching the Holy Grail War for quite some time. All of that was something I learned long ago. There's no need for you to be worried about it.
But, for the first time, I protested more than once. No, perhaps it wasn't the first time, but it couldn't have been so desperate before. I just wanted to say, at the very least, you can't just accept that.
Jeez.
My master took out a cigar. With a small, bitter smile, he took out his knife, cut the tip, and struck a match to light it, just like always. Though it was the normal ritual, this time alone it didn't help me calm down at all. Even with the characteristic scent of cigar smoke filling the room, I still felt like I was on the edge of tears.
Professor... Yes?
He stepped over to Coles, who had been silent up until now.
I don't know much about this Holy Grail War, and I don't understand the situation that well, so maybe I'm completely wrong in this. If there's someone who is important to you, isn't it obvious that you would want them to remember you? At the very least, I would think that's how everyone else feels.
Coles struck straight to the heart of it. In response, my master faintly smiled.
That's right. It's not like I'm happy that I've been forgotten or anything.
The smoke from his cigar wavered, drawing his eyes up to the ceiling.
But even then, there is someone I want to meet even if he's forgotten. There's something I want to confirm, something I need to see finished, so I can move on from these past 10 years. Yes, at the very least, the Holy Grail War is just a small thing to me. To share those memories and bond over them is just too happy an ending to be realistic, no matter how much of a price I've paid. There's no way I can afford such an ending with just my life.
Holding the cigar in his mouth, the lingering scent of smoke hanging in the room seemed like nothing. I just wanted to shake my head, to deny what he said. But with the way he made that troubled smile, I just couldn't put it into words.
What do you think? Do you think that invitation was left by Miss Algamarie?
Who knows? Normally, it seems like a tactic that's outside her style, though. There would be no point to dragging up a whole conversation about the relic only to pretend like she didn't know it was stolen.
When it came to magi, though, a method being too roundabout or meaningless was something you couldn't really count on. Even if the possibility was low, that alone could serve as a part of some sort of magecraft.
First of all, we have this letter.
He said, lifting up the letter Coles had found earlier. Eyeing it over once more, he stated his conclusion.
Come to the caboose at night.
At night?
Yes, we've come this far. Why not answer it?
Part 5. However, before evening could come around, another bizarre occurrence took place. As the three of us spoke and prepared for the evening, suddenly the Rail Zeppelin came to a stop.
The train? As we looked around in confusion, an announcement came on over the room's speakers.
This is your conductor, Rodan. The train will remain at this location for the next 2 hours. Afterwards, it will depart once more. All guests are welcome to remain in their rooms or leave the train as you wish.
It seems like it's a scheduled stop.
Perhaps that was all part of the auction schedule.
Shall we go take a look outside then?
Ah, okay.
I guess I'll come, too.
At my master's words, we all left the room, leaving the train behind us. There was no way we could call this place a station. We were deep in the forest, at a place that made it strange to think tracks were running here at all. The only place missing densely packed trees were the areas directly in front of and behind the train. The red, rusted-over tracks were covered in bushes that made them seem like they had been assimilated by the forest around them. A refreshing breeze caressed my face. Though we couldn't see beyond the forest at all, a cool wind still reached us, giving me a refreshed feeling.
Aha! Nice fresh air.
The man that had left the train shortly before us stood in the forest, arms wide, as he breathed in the atmosphere.
G. Mario, you said your name was?
Yes, I'm honored a lord of the clock tower would remember me.
Spinning his white hat in his hand, he took a bow, perhaps because he was used to performing on TV. Everything he did seemed unnaturally exaggerated. Though his smug expression was much brighter and more cheerful than my master's ever was, it was something distinctly unfamiliar to me.
But the service is great, isn't it? I was just getting bored of seeing nothing but fog outside my window. Having a chance to step off the train isn't bad at all. Though, perhaps I would have preferred somewhere a bit more flowery.
His loud voice seemed half serious and half like he was trying to insinuate something. Though I was more than comfortable in such undeveloped areas, I could understand someone feeling the opposite. Well, anyways, the sandwiches here are just what you would expect. Sitting down in a chair that had been set up, Mario took a bite of his fruit sandwich. A number of other magi had disembarked from the train as well. Nearby, a number of tables had been set up, covered with sandwiches and other light foods.
The Gavosella's daughter isn't interested, and Animosphere's daughter only poked her head outside before returning.
As if trying to pique my master's interest, Mario kept speaking. Perhaps because of his experience as a television performer, his ability to read the atmosphere was excellent. One more person came out. The old man from the Holy Church Carabo, Frampton, stood apart from everyone else, drinking tea. If it hadn't been for the incident earlier, I would have thought his manner of ignoring everyone else and going by his own pace was very Magus-like. Suddenly I turned. Master? My master had started walking into the forest on the other side of the tables. Using his hands to push aside the thickly grown branches, the thick scent of the forest filled the air. In a small open space beyond the trees, a circle of mushrooms was growing in a neat circle.
A fairy circle?
I'm not upset, you silly Willy.
Yvette said, suddenly popping her head in. It seemed she had also decided to leave the train for a bit. The pink-haired, eye-patched classmate drew Cole's attention.
You know about these, Yvette?
The rails for this train are apparently built following ley lines. Probably something to do with maintaining their supply of magical energy. So when they stop, it tends to be at some kind of power spot. Fairy journal sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? How about doing that for our honeymoon, Professor?
Ah, I see. If you follow the ley lines of England, you'll end up on a path tied up with fairies. That's only natural, I guess. So rather than sightseeing, this is more like restocking.
Almost too naturally, my master gave his opinion, completely ignoring Yvette's closing comment. He then glanced back at the stopped train.
I guess it's obvious, but this train follows its own rules after all.
For some reason, my master's words gave me a sinking feeling. Though the castle Adra and towers of Isalma were the same, being built by a dead apostle, the Rail Zeppelin was in a different class. Even so, it still had its own set of rules. Maybe everything in this world had its own set of rules that it had to follow. People followed the rules of people. Magi followed the rules of magi. The dead followed the rules of the dead. as I shook my head. Trying to cut off that line of thought, my eye caught something.
Gray?
It's nothing. I just thought I saw something. I said, narrowing my eyes. It was beyond the trees. Standing within the fog was the figure of a woman clad in white, someone I hadn't seen at all on the train earlier. Around her was a cloud of vibrant flower petals, as if she was being decorated in another world. Rose petals. Around where the woman stood, dozens of bright red roses bloomed proudly. Not just around her, but the brilliantly coloured flowers also wove through her hair like a crown, making her look like a personification of the flowers themselves. The woman raised her face. Her sharp scarlet eyes met mine. And in the next moment she was gone. And in the next moment she was gone. At that point.
So, little disciple?
Is something wrong?
Both Yvette and my master were standing beside me frowning. I immediately became flustered, thinking of how hard to miss that person must have been.
What? But now there was a white woman with red roses.
That would be the manager's representative of the Rail Zeppelin.
An unexpected voice came to the rescue as I pointed helplessly at where I saw her. It was the conductor that had introduced himself when we first boarded the train. His name was Rodin, if I remembered correctly.
The manager's representative?
With a sudden intensity, my master turned around. That's right. On that first invitation we had received, that was the name that had been written. That's who my master had been looking for the moment he had got on the train.
Yes, since the owner of the Rail Zeppelin retired, she's been looking after it. Even we meet her only rarely. But it seems you have a sensitivity beyond that of any ordinary magus.
Sensitivity. I understood that in some way. For example, the ability to perceive the faint, lingering thoughts that stained the depths of the earth was something Magi couldn't do. That was the reason I left my home.
The owner retired?
Originally, this auction was an idea proposed by the owner, but there was some trouble in the past. Since then, the owner has stayed apart from the train, leaving a representative to act in their place.
Trouble?
Was that the story about Tuco I heard about? As my master's expression became heated, that thought idly crossed my mind. But before I could follow it any further, in the gentle atmosphere of the forest, a girl's scream tore the calm. My master responded instantly to the sound.
Gray.
Understood. With a firm response, I took off at full speed. Jumping off the ground, I sailed 3 seconds through the air before reaching the door, turning the bar halfway. Doing what I could to slow myself down in the air, I immediately started running through the train. I immediately understood the source of the scream. With my ears, I could easily tell that from where we were standing. But even then, the moment I opened the door, I went stiff.
Wow, dear.
Hey, come on.
Behind me, I could hear Yvette and Gimario groaning. As other Magi arrived one by one, they all caught their breath. The scene before us was so gruesome, even those with the sensibilities of a magus would be taken aback at the first glance. A red stain was spreading on the luxurious carpet of the Rail Zeppelin. In the middle of that stain was a single tipped-over chair and a single human body. Trisha Fellows. Just looking at the amount of blood, it was hard to imagine her being alive, but more than that, something was missing. Her head was nowhere to be seen. Even so, we could recognize her from the purple coat she was wearing. The coat that matched her so well was now being quickly dyed red.
Trisha!
Immediately beside her, Olga Marie was on her knees. The scream earlier had been hers. After all, with the way Trisha was now, there was no way she could scream herself.
I left the train to clear my head in the forest. Then I went to the lobby to get some tea, and when I came back, Trisha. Trisha.
No one could answer her mutterings. All the while, the sound of blood dripping from her body continued. Chapter 3, Part 1. The world looked like bubbles. Peoples, things, nothing ever changed. Masses of bubbles piled up, and somehow made themselves into a shape like that. That was the way his eyes saw the world. Burst as they disappeared, born as they burst. In the end, the world as a whole never changed. In some sense, maybe that was eternity. If the world is just a collection of transient bubbles, that chain of transience is like to infinity. No matter how you split it apart, no matter how thin it grew, it never disappeared. An instant was a lifetime, and an equal number of universes burst and disappeared. So, he didn't know when it started. But, since they were just bubbles anyway, you could pop them just by touching them. You could split them off just by tracing the boundaries between them. Large or small had no relevance. Living or not had even less. In those eyes, they had no meaning at all. He only learned of the name Mystic Eyes much later. Yes, they must have been at the very end of what could be considered mystic eyes. In short, mystic eyes with the rank of rainbow. Olga Marie's face had long since lost its color. With trembling fingers, she reached out to the corpse's coat. Ignoring the blood sticking to her hands, she shook the headless body as she spoke.
Trisha?
Once more, she tried.
Trisha? Trisha? This is a joke, right? Why?
As that last word came out, her voice choked, a single choked sob, as if a broken lung was doing its best to perform at least the bare minimum necessary.
You're always so full of yourself. Whenever I can't solve a problem, you're always too happy to encourage me, so why are you sleeping in a place like this? Come on, yell at someone like you always do.
Miss Olga Marie? But when she turned to me, her expression held a violent hatred.
You people did this, didn't you?
Taken aback by the sudden attack, we couldn't even string together 2 words in answer.
What is wrong with you? Give back Trisha.
Her bitter cries echoed within the train car. Even if she was the daughter of a lord, she was only about 11 years old. Faced with a scene like this, it was hard to imagine anyone would be able to keep their cool. Even more so if it was someone who had been a teacher to you since you were young. But the words that followed caused the tension in the room to explode.
You! It was you, wasn't it? From the church!
She screamed, facing the silent old man Carabo Frampton. A number of people turned to look at him.
Sorry, but it wasn't.
He then asked for something else.
Would you allow me to perform an autopsy?
Autopsy?
Yes. It's not my specialty, but these hands are well used to death. I may be able to find something out. Is that acceptable, Mr. Conductor?
He asked the conductor, who had arrived to the scene shortly after us. Even witnessing this scene, the bone-thin conductor's expression was unchanging. Did that mean events like this were common on the Rail Zeppelin? Was it so normal to kill your rivals even before the auction had started here? Taking a look at the silver pocket watch he pulled from his chest pocket, he gave a small nod.
I do not mind, but the room will need cleaning. Taking into account our scheduled time of departure, I would ask you finish within the hour.
He said it as if it was obvious, with an earnestness that made no room for doubting his ability as a first-class staff member. He spoke as if nothing more than food had been spilled. Maybe that's why I found the girl's response so relieving.
What is wrong with you? Get back, Trisha!
Olga Marie stretched out her hand, and an invisible something shot out. A magical bullet. A pure bundle of magical energy, even to a complete novice like me. I could tell it had a much higher density than the one Rains had fired earlier. Even in its simplicity, I couldn't help but feel its power was appropriate for a future lord. In an instant, the blade in Carabo's hand deflected the bolt. With a handle that was too short to call a sword, I was informed later by my master that it was something commonly referred to as a black key, a tool that had become popular with a number of executors of the Holy Church. It's really uplifting. But I didn't even notice him pulling out that weapon. I felt like if he wanted to.
Lord El-Melloi II. The Case Files of Lord El-Melloi II. Cast by Artelle Studio. Please subscribe to our channel if you enjoy listening.
He could stab someone straight through the heart, all while having a friendly conversation with them. Without even understanding why their chest hurt, they would be dead. You!
Apologies.
The old man's hand flicked to the side, as the handle of the black key struck lightly against the side of her head. Olga Marie collapsed unconscious. Grabbing her as she fell, he gently laid her out on a sofa outside of the growing bloodstain.
Could I ask you to look after her? I imagine it will be quite a shock to her if she wakes up in this room again. If possible, I'd like her taken to the lobby.
Ah, right. I'll take care of it.
As I stood still, unmoving in shock, Coles volunteered. Even in this situation, he was still unexpectedly calm. Was the time when his sister gave up magecrafts so difficult for him? He had said that his own family had been trying to kill him. That experience must have tempered his mind well. As Coles took the unconscious girl from the room, Carabo began inspecting around the body. Soon after, another person entered the car.
Another incident like this? You seem to attract these scuffles between magi a lot, don't you?
You're one to talk.
Without even turning to see, it seemed he could tell it was Hishiri Adashino.
I wasn't in the mood, so I didn't leave the train when we stopped earlier. But now it seems I'm missing an alibi, aren't I?
An alibi means nothing for a magi in the first place. You of all people should be well aware of that.
No problem then, I guess.
Hishiri, too, showed no sign of discomfort at the sight of the corpse. Maybe it was me that was strange. Whether it was at my old home or in Adrore Salma, I had witnessed all sorts of bizarre incidents. Maybe it was me who was strange for getting paralyzed by fear like this. At any rate, I didn't want to think about it now. As I hung my head, trying to distract myself from the swirling nausea in my stomach, the conversation continued.
Time of death must be within the past 10 or 20 minutes. I believe we can accept cause of death as removal of the head. There are no signs of struggle, so the death must have been instant.
In the outside world, they would have started with taking pictures of the scene, but it seemed that was unnecessary. After all, detailed records could be made directly using magic circuits, and the evidence used by modern science could easily be fabricated by a magus, so there was little trust in such strategies.
But why did the culprit take the head? Are they intending to use it as some sort of catalyst?
It appears she had mystic eyes of foresight.
Oh?
The wrinkles on the old man's face deepened. Taking another look at the body, my master continued.
I wonder if the culprit took the entire head for the sake of retrieving the eyes from them.
I felt a shiver run through me. With just that, my master's terrifying thoughts punched through. It was just too Magus-like. It was just too appropriate for something happening on the Rail Zeppelin. Why done it?
The whole head just to get at the eyes. Is such a thing possible? Removing the eyes from the head after removing it from the body.
Perhaps we should ask the staff of the Rail Zeppelin.
My master said, turning to face the other staff member present behind him, the blindfolded auctioneer, Leandra. With a small nod in greeting, she confirmed my master's words.
If using the same techniques that we do, if the head is well preserved, removing the mystic eyes would be simple. And to be clear, even outside the Rail Zeppelin, mystic eye transplants are not impossible, though we would expect a striking difference in the success rate.
Was that last comment just the pride of a family specialized in mystic eyes?
In that case, I would like to continue the autopsy. And I would also like to discuss something with you, Mr. Carabo.
The remaining magi left without much complaint. It seemed to them it was nothing more than a simple servant being killed. Perhaps they also felt it was to their advantage that one of their potential competitors at the auction had been removed. I felt a strange sensation, totally unlike that of the previous incidents. Mixed together with the scent of blood permeating the room, my unease continued to grow. I pressed a hand tightly to my chest.
First, may I ask you something?
Kneeling on the carpet, he had his usual magnifying glass out as he inspected various parts of the scene, pouring various substances on the bloodstains and taking memos of their reactions. He seemed more like a detective from a century prior than a magus. Seeing him like that for some reason helped me to calm down a little. Sitting on a chair across from him, Carabo responded.
What would that be? You not hate magi?
The Holy Church and the Magic Association were always in perpetual conflict. That wasn't just because of some power struggle or historical disagreement, but because of a fundamental ideological difference. An uncrossable divide between those who attempted to conceal and protect mystery, and those who sought to deny and destroy the mystery of all those outside themselves. The old man clicked his tongue.
Yes, if I were honest, I would love nothing more than to offer up a prayer for your salvation and send the lot of you on your way to purgatory.
Perhaps the only priest-like thing about what he said was the mention of purgatory, because that was the place where those who couldn't enter heaven would have their souls purified. Though it was a place of suffering, it wasn't a place like hell, where true sinners were sent.
But that is a different matter. These black keys were not made to slay children mourning over their dead companions.
Though brief, I felt a deep conviction to his words. Chewing over those words, my master slowly spoke again.
Carabo Frampton, do you possess a receptive type of mystic eyes?
The old man was quiet for a time. Slowly lifting his gaze, his voice sounded like the scraping of rusted iron.
Why do you ask?
Thinking of your age, it seems more likely you would come here to sell mystic eyes, rather than buy them. Besides, the Holy Church isn't generally interested in any magecraft beyond the baptismal rites. I wondered if the reason you volunteered to do the autopsy was because you had mystic eyes that would help in some way.
That's right. Yvette had said something similar. Though my master had arrived to that conversation after Yvette's explanation was done, it seemed he had come to the same conclusion. After another pause.
It appears I can't hide it, Lord. My eyes are mystic eyes of hindsight.
Hindsight.
The opposite of foresight. I wondered if these were what Olgamori had meant by rainbow-ranked mystic eyes.
Yes, they aren't all that impressive. Perhaps they would reach the rank of a noble color, as you, Magi, put it, but it certainly would fall short of the gold rank. But let's see. This young girl did your hair this morning, didn't she?
Ah, yes.
You seem quite used to it. Even though the Lord here asked for 5 more minutes, you just propped him up on calls and kept going. It seems you were investigating something, but it's not related to this incident.
For a moment, I held my breath. No doubt he was referring to our investigation over the stolen relic. Even though the exchange between my master and I was something I had already mostly forgotten, the fact he could see that much confirmed the authenticity of those mystic eyes.
That's about what I can see. Unfortunately, they are not so useful as to be able to see something of any time or place that I wish.
So basically, the eyes are in more control than you are. Is that correct?
I can control their activation to a degree, and they are more often drawn to times where magecraft and mystery are thick, so they have their uses.
But at my age, they seem to be getting pulled around a lot more than usual. My intention, as I mentioned to the auctioneer, was to sell them.
I believe you'll find them in the catalogue tomorrow.
In short, Yvette had been right. As expected of a regular of the Rail Zeppelin, his hand stopped, as if he was thinking something over. My master finally continued.
Then, did you see the culprit?
No, I didn't.
You can't?
Perhaps they had some kind of protection against clairvoyance. I can see up until the point she sat down on this chair, but the time immediately before and after her head was removed is unclear.
After another pause, my master spoke again.
In that case, they may have had some protection against Trisha Fellows as well.
What?
The old man's eyes widened. In the middle of the blood-stained room, my master's voice resounded gently.
If she had seen it coming, she likely would have taken some measures against it. At the very least, she should have mentioned something to her master Olgamari. In short, her death and the culprit were guarded against foresight and hindsight. They couldn't be seen from the past or the future.
Carabo went silent. My master whispered at last, as if uttering his conclusion.
It's like they are a person invisible to time.
Though it sounded rather poetic, it seemed to fit the situation. Invisible from both the past and the future, her death was something that existed only in the present moment of its occurrence.
But of course, you have no evidence to support that I am telling the truth. My whole spiel about mystic eyes of hindsight could be entirely false. Even that story of what you did this morning could have been something I heard from someone else.
True. But for someone like you who is trying to protect someone, I want to trust you.
For a moment, the old man was at a loss for words. He then slowly shook his head.
Never would have expected that from a Lord of the Clock Tower.
I'm not all that experienced, but I have faith in my ability to gauge people. Above all, mystic eyes are not the result of some spell, but of the body's own nature. They are the oldest magecraft known to humans, deriving from neither ritual nor study, yet nonetheless continue to shake up the brain. If that's the case, that should also be reflected in the way someone lives.
Have you met someone with mystic eyes before?
I spoke to Trisha while she was still alive. She told me having mystic eyes means being bound by them.
For a moment, he glanced at the headless body.
But that's not all. As a lord, of course, I've met any number of magi with mystic eyes. It's something they always take very seriously.
At the last part, he gave a bitter smile. It was the first time I had seen the otherwise entirely formal old man smile.
My mystic eyes of hindsight are much more violent things. For example, using them is like extracting my brain and throwing it in a vat with some black and white film.
Even without eyeballs, they always aggressively take in whatever information they can. Maybe that's it. Like a feeling of the characters of a film being transferred. Like there are two versions of myself existing at once, the one receiving all the information from that point of view, and another looking at the film from the outside. Maybe it doesn't make any sense, but that's how it feels.
Humans are captivated by whatever they see. The brain is designed to not be able to focus on two things at once, after all.
Even if I exist in both the past and present, I can only see one thing at a time. Another way of putting it is, if you are looking at the past, you can't live in the present. Ever since I became aware of these eyes, I've never once been able to do that.
Those words struck me hard. Trisha had said something similar, that they see a different world from that of ordinary people. I wondered if people who possessed receptive mystic eyes were destined for a fate like that. Just like, for example, since 10 years ago I was doomed to live in a body that wasn't my own. Carabot turned to face the entrance. A moment later, Coles opened the door.
Professor, Olga Marie is awake.
Anyways, I've done what I can. Please give my regards to the Animosphere girl.
So saying, Carabot left the scene. Part 2. A quiet stillness lay over the lobby car. It looked entirely untouched since the time we were last there, except that the fruit had been replenished. Apparently, the staff of the lobby were permanently stationed there, as even now they were at Olga Marie's side, serving her tea. At a nod from my master as he entered the room, they departed. Once they had left, we were alone in the room with Olga Marie. Though Coles looked particularly uncomfortable taking care of her, Olga Marie herself was the first to speak.
It's nothing. This is the Rail Zeppelin, I guess. I expected this kind of thing to happen.
She was obviously faking it. That was easy enough to see from the faint tremble in her knees and her bloodshot eyes. Even as a daughter of a Lord of the Clock Tower, there was no way she was used to being so suddenly alone. Rhines, too. I wondered if Rains had also had a similar experience. Apparently, until she had managed to consolidate control over the El-Melloi faction, she had to carry around her own emergency rations in constant fear of being poisoned. Even if that were the case, though, it's not like it would help Olga Marie here at all. My master continued to speak in his usual composed voice.
Even so, if you hope to return from this auction with the results you wanted, you should rest a little more. I asked the staff, and apparently they've prepared another room for you somewhere else.
I don't need it. They'll clean it up, right?
She firmly shook her head. Did that mean she would sleep in a room tonight where her attendant since so long ago was killed? Would she be able to sleep at all?
In the first place, this is all just a ruse to earn a favor from Animosphere, right? Well, as a fellow aristocrat, I can't exactly say I'm ungrateful.
She spoke quickly, glaring at my master. My master, however, just shook his head.
No, that's not my intention at all. Call it a whim if you like. Besides, I can't imagine the clock tower taking any incident aboard the Rail Zeppelin very seriously.
Are you actually a lord? You should be more than happy to take advantage of this situation. No matter how much the Animosphere family holds themselves away up in their mountain and stays out of politics, a lord is still a lord. As a dead lost in rank among the 12 families, shouldn't you be scrabbling for every favor you can get?
I appreciate your advice, but this is something of a personal principle of mine.
Principal?
Back when I was still inexperienced, there was someone who told me that inexperience itself was a sign of the ability to rule. That because I always yearned for that which was beyond me, I was able to keep struggling. That belief that glory lies beyond the horizon was a foundational part of his lifestyle, so he was always saying stupid things like that.
Taking an apple from a nearby table, he lifted it up. For some reason, that apple looked to me like a globe. Without knowing the earth itself was round, the kings of old always pursued what lay in the distance. Without realizing they were just going around in circles, they truly believed that the value of a person's life was in how far they could go. It made me think of an Olympic long jumper for some reason. Running as hard as they could, exhausting everything they had in the process, to soar through the sky in those last few moments, and the value of their life would be found in where they landed.
Someday, whether I liked it or not, I would find my own course. That's what he told me. For that reason, the time would surely come when I would have to fight for it. So, throwing away the life of a person who has yet to find their own course, to me, that's unforgivable. That belief is something much more important to me than the power games of the clock tower.
A sign of the ability to rule? You were told something like that in the Holy Grail War? Was that by the servant you summoned?
Yes.
How idiotic. A servant is just a fake copy of a heroic spirit, like a shadow erased in an instant. Sure, you can argue that they were important figures that carved their names into history, but a magus that can be so easily influenced by them is getting things backwards.
What? I couldn't help but protest. Those memories of my master were something I couldn't let be violated. No one had the right to call them idiotic. But
For now, I'll tell the staff you plan to change rooms. Thankfully, I believe the room next to ours is empty. If there's anything you need, please feel free to ask us. Calls.
Right.
calls jumped slightly at suddenly being called on.
Would you mind keeping her company until she feels like returning to her room?
Course, I couldn't just leave her alone in a situation like this.
As calls nodded in consent, Olga Marie bared her teeth as if to protest, but as if recognizing no protest she gave now would be listened to. She looked away, biting her thumbnail in frustration. My master then turned to leave, and I followed him back to the passenger car. Behind us,
What a weirdo!
I heard her voice. Though she sounded angry, at the same time there was an air of sadness to her voice.
What a weirdo.
After the incident, the train was strangely quiet. Most of the invitees locked themselves in their room, making preparations for their own defense. Because of the way Magi worked, they were typically more skilled at defense than offense, so in the off chance that the killings were going to continue, they would be better served by retreating to their own rooms and fortifying their positions there. So it wasn't like everyone was just hiding scared in their rooms. One of them was Mario Spinera, checking himself in a mirror, brushing the dust from his felt hat, tightening his necktie, straightening the wrinkles in his suit. All of this he did in good spirits, humming a tune. The reason for his care was soon apparent. Slowly, the door to his room swung open.
Good afternoon.
Good. I was starting to get flustered, worrying over whether you were still coming.
Mario Spinera. Earlier, you said you had a clue as to the incident earlier, correct?
But But no need to rush. First, Would you like a glass of wine? As expected of the Rail Zeppelin, the vintage provided is top-notch. I've always wanted to give this Margot a try. It's a rare chance to meet in a place like this, so why don't we enjoy ourselves for a bit?
Well then, I'll be on my way.
Wait, don't be so hasty.
In response to Jomario's exaggerated protests, Hishiri's smile was unmoving. No matter how refined his ability to push through situations was by the media, in the face of her absolute refusal to negotiate, there was little he could do but capitulate.
Fine, I get it. Let's talk then.
Pouring the red wine into a glass for himself only, he whispered as the drink gently swirled.
But if I told you I had seen that way of killing before?
For a moment, Hishiri's eyes narrowed.
Could you give me a brief summary?
About 7 years ago, it became a rather popular talking point. A serial killer that never took anything of value, only the victims' heads.
It seemed every bit a crime for the crime's sake. With a small frown, Hishiri asked the most obvious question.
If such an incident occurred, I couldn't imagine the media letting it go.
Well, that would be because of the clock tower's information control. Though perhaps, as they'd say in the East, I'm lecturing the Buddha here. Of course, the influence the Faculty of Law has on the public face of society is enormous. The fact they were interested at all in information control in this incident leaves one to believe it is related to mystery, does it not? That mystery must be concealed after all. That's the first unwavering principle of the clock tower. If that was an incident tied up in mystery back then, wouldn't it make sense that it's closely related to what we saw today?
So you think that serial killer from 7 years ago is here, on the Rail Zeppelin?
Something like that was barely more than an urban legend. The fact they just happened to show up on the same train sounded like the script to some awful B-grade horror movie. But in the same way, wasn't the Rail Zeppelin, and even Magi themselves, just a fairy tale as well?
But Faculty of Law is also called the First Principle Enforcement Division, right?
A sharp light shone from Jean Mario's eyes, but Hishiri shook her head without a moment's hesitation. Unfortunately, 7 years ago was before I joined the Faculty of Law. I don't know what you think of us, but we aren't so lax as to let people unrelated to a case browse its files.
Well, that's unfortunate. Let me be frank with you. The one who took the biggest beating from that drive to hide information was an announcer I knew well. I was hoping you'd be able to tell me all about what had happened back then.
To what end? It can't just be curiosity.
Maybe that was typical of the Faculty of Law. As one responsible for keeping Magi in check by limiting information, any unrelated information was totally unnecessary.
Maybe about 30% curiosity.
That's why Gian Mario, despite his flippant manner, was straight with his words.
Television, you know, is unexpectedly fun. It's good money, too. We're talking $10,000 for a single zombie. My family is only second-rate when it comes to magecraft, but thanks to the media, we've been able to obtain any number of talismans and catalysts without ever having to worry about the cost. I owe them a great debt.
His eyes seemed to moisten, like he was watching a dream. With a tilt from his hand, he allowed a single thread of red wine to spill out from his glass over his own wrist. From his sleeve, a shadow reached out to claim the dripping wine. But Hishiri showed no signs of being disturbed. It seemed she was more than comfortable with familiars like that. Those who used black magic to turn insects or small animals into familiars were all too common. Jean Mario must have just been another one of those.
But stand back.
Crawling out from his sleeve, the spiders didn't let a single drop of wine stain the sleeve of his suit.
The reason I've gathered so many accomplishments on television and in society at large is because it's something other magi would be unlikely to do. If someone with the same talent does the same thing, the results will all be the same too, right? In that case, it's best to use what you've got to the best of your ability.
His way of thinking was similar to a line of thought common in the New Ages. Against magi, who relied on the magic circuits and magic crests built up by their ancestors, a magus of middling talents couldn't hope to reach very far. In that case, if the old families were going to remain set in their ways, there was an advantage to be gained by doing something new, like appealing to modern science or the media. Of course, there was no certainty in that. After all, even the head of Archelot, one of the 12 lords, was famous among those who were into the modern trends. And like they discussed before, the Faculty of Law had plenty of influence through royalty and governmental bodies to manage the media. With that preamble, Jamario swirled the wine in his glass once more before finishing it.
Create a connection with the Faculty of Law in preparation for the debut of gold or even jewel rank mystic eyes. It's a rather perfect plan, don't you think?
Not a bad one.
Finally, in a quiet voice, Hishiri replied, and then, as if a con artist before the easiest mark, a wide smile rose to his face.
So how about it? Shall we work together for this auction?
Part 3. Within the misty forest, I could see the sky beyond the fog was a deep red, the color of twilight. Passing through the gaps in the branches and trees, the evening light cutting through the fog brought to mind the similar color of blood I had seen a few hours earlier. Holding my hands to my chest, I felt the pounding of my own heart help to draw me a little bit closer to reality. Calls was still with Olga Marie. My master and I had come alone to the deck of the train's final car. This is where they wanted to meet us? Behind the locomotive of the Rail Zeppelin were 2 more cars, followed by the dining car in the lobby. After that were 5 guest cars, with the end of the train consisting of 2 more freight cars. We decided to pass through the freight cars as well. The cars themselves were mostly empty, only housing a few wooden boxes and bags. Compared to the other cars, it was surprisingly plain, but that was probably because guests weren't supposed to enter them in the first place. Or perhaps the manager of the Rail Zeppelin just felt like adding a section that seemed more third class. This was the place the letter indicated. Standing on the deck, the cool breeze washed over us as my master watched the tracks behind us disappear into the distance. At this point, there was no impression that anyone was coming to meet us. Though keeping my attention focused on the surroundings, I quietly spoke again. Will Olga Marie be okay?
Murder is a common occurrence within the clock tower. Even more so if you're associated with the lords. But even then, I doubted she expected fate to come for her like this. Even if we can give her the time she needs, whether she processes it well comes down to her.
Most magi hearing my master talk like that would probably think him too soft. Just like Olga Marie said, this was a prime opportunity to rack up debts. The risk wasn't particularly large, but the price one would pay for that sense of security couldn't be underestimated. My master must have understood that, so the reason why he didn't take advantage of it, though he said it was an issue of principles, I felt like it was connected to something much deeper than that. My master was one who well understood the ethics and morals of both magi and ordinary people. Holding both of those ethical standards and ideals, he always sniffed out the culprit, resolving the case. But of course my master had his own rules that he followed. Why done it? Why did the incident occur? Probably the core of his personality had been formed in the Fourth Holy Grail War. But I felt like there had to be something more to it. I felt like the rules he operated under, his own why done it, had a depth that I had yet to understand. Though if I had to explain it out loud, I couldn't give any more than that vague summary.
With this, I guess we can't escape outside.
What do you mean? What's...
I'm talking about this place. It was the same when we stopped before. Within this fog is like a different world. Both getting out of it and infiltrating into it would be rather difficult. Trying to board the train or get off of it outside of the ordinary times permitted for a magus.
You mean we wouldn't be able to escape even if we jumped off and flew away?
I wouldn't say it's impossible, but flying away as a single person is already difficult on its own.
At my master's words, my brow furrowed slightly. Though I wasn't a magus, I still took lectures at the clock tower. One particular memory of those lectures stood out. But isn't something like floating through the air simple enough? They teach it in basic fundamentals, after all.
Your lecture was with Professor Craig, right? He must have left something out thinking it was obvious enough it didn't need repeating. Certainly the spell itself is simple enough. That presumes a constant flow of magical energy, though.
Magical energy?
If you wanted to suspend a small stone, for instance, that spell would work fine. But as the size and mass of the object increases, The amount of magical energy required increases exponentially. Floating something like a human body would be a much different task. Of course, there are exceptions out there, but in general, it's pretty uncommon in magecraft.
Exceptions?
Of course, you must have heard of witches flying around on brooms, right? That stems from an old form of magic foundation, a kind of black magic. By rubbing a witch's ointment on someone, you could make it so a person's feet would never reach the ground.
A foundation is usually engraved into the land itself by the faith and logic of the people. Within that territory, certain kinds of magecraft would become more powerful or possibly weaker. I remembered learning that in my lectures.
So, that means a female magus would be able to fly?
In a way. But even in that situation, keeping one's mind clear while doing so is a challenge. After all, a witch's ointment is a kind of narcotic. I'm not sure about under normal circumstances, but trying an extended flight in this kind of closed world would be effectively suicide.
I see. That's why it's impossible here. To escape from this fog, one would likely have to go a considerable distance. I was starting to understand what my master was saying. It was like I also heard in my lectures at the clock tower. Even if magecraft is omnipotent, the people using it are still limited.
There are mystic codes that allow floating like that for extremely limited amounts of time. And there are low-level spirits that could be summoned to help one glide. But in the end, long-distance flight is something that's basically impossible in the modern era. If you try to push it anyways, it would take the equivalent magical energy of a brand-level magus using the entire supply of their own territory to sustain it. And even if you attempt to follow a ley line as you do it, they aren't built in a way that is easy for people to draw energy from. It isn't reasonable to try and draw that much magical energy out of them on the fly.
Well, that's why things like Tuco travel are considered cheating, he said with a mutter. His lack of forthcoming explanation must have been because there was no need to discuss it here. With such a broad range of things that magecraft was capable of, just flooding me with that information would do little more than make my head spin. With a bitter smile at my master's kind restraint, I looked up at the sky. It seems the clouds are moving in.
Though it was difficult to see through the mist, the sky above was filled with dark clouds. The bright red sky from before was being dyed black.
The change in colour didn't help the memories of blood, though it was certainly a bright colour while within the human body. Once it was spilled, the oxygen in the air quickly began to change the blood to black. As if the fragment of remaining life were melting away, the bright red sky gradually turned dark. No way, I felt like saying, as I was just looking casually at the scenery going by, a light met my eyes. What is...
Gray?
Master, something is coming.
Likely, if one wasn't on the rearmost car of the train, they wouldn't notice it. It was still far away. I couldn't see it well from where we were. As I looked around for a better vantage point, a roaring sound filled the air.
It's lightning. There was no way natural lightning could appear so suddenly. I remembered Atram Galiasta's weather manipulation that I witnessed at Azelma, but even his magecraft took dozens of people working for a long time to prepare, and all it did was create slightly better conditions for a storm. No matter how skilled a magus, creating lightning like that in what my master said was a closed-off world shouldn't have been possible. Here!
Jumping up to catch the ladder, I climbed to the top of the train car. My master followed soon after. No doubt his ability to stay stable on the swaying train car was due to some sort of strengthening magecraft he was using on his legs. It was so close as to completely blind us. The impact stunned me completely. Standing between the striker and my master to cover him, I instinctively covered my ears. My master had said before, even for a magus, a person flying through the air would be difficult. With his explanation, I had come to agree. If that was the case, though, then where did this person come from? After a short pause, she lifted her head.
You actually came.
A dignified voice reached my ears, just now regaining her sense of hearing. It was a beautiful woman. She looked to be around 20 years old, and rather tall. Not just her height, but the way she stood so effortlessly on the roof of the moving train car made her look larger. Her black hair fluttered in soft waves in the wind of the moving train. and her eyes were each a different color. Her slim figure wore plain-looking leather underneath metal armor, and she had a simple, easy-to-use short sword on her hip.
Should I look down on you for coming here, even knowing it might be a trap? Or should I praise you for having the fortitude to come even with so little strength? Which do you think?
Though the way she spoke gave no impression of hostility, the way her strange eyes peered into the depths of me had me stuck firmly in place. More than anything, more than any of the dozens of magi I had met, she seemed entirely out of place in this era. Almost like she had jumped out of a fairy tale.
Me? What's wrong? You should be able to understand me. Did I use some archaic phrase or something?
Shaking my head, I drove the unnecessary thoughts out of my head. Right now, I didn't need that kind of thinking at all. What I needed was a straight, clear shot at the problem. Are you the one who stole from my master? I said nothing of the relic. If she was the culprit, she would understand, and if she wasn't, she had no need to know. Whether she understood my thinking or not, her face broke out into a wide smile.
Nah, yes, that's correct. I am a follower of said thief.
When a beautiful woman laughed, people often likened them to flowers or jewels. Some might prefer a comparison to art or fruit, but for this woman, I saw only iron. Iron rusted over with blood. A woman clad in the scent of iron was a rare thing. Whether it was by sword or armor or shield, it was the scent of someone who vied for supremacy on the battlefield.
Then give it back.
Stepping forward, my right shoulder tensed, ready at any moment to draw my weapon.
Gray.
But before I could, my master called out to stop me. Normally, my master always looked deeply to discern the strengths and weaknesses of our opponent. No matter how berserk I had gone, he would always act as the stopper, pulling me back when it was necessary. But this time, something was wrong. His voice was a little higher than usual, his breathing rough. Since he saw that woman, for a moment I wondered if it was a familiar face, but his next words put that idea to rest.
Who? Who are you?
The armored woman sighed.
What an unpleasant face. Shabby, fussy, dark, obstinate, bad at waking up. Someone who only reads moldy old books, proud despite his own menial nature. And despite wearing the face of someone who's suffering from their circumstances, you're the one causing all of those circumstances. How about that? It's all true, isn't it?
I was at a loss for words. It was like she was listing off each and every tiny detail about his life. Though she was right about everything, she clicked her tongue as if she was the most troubled by it all.
I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I was sick enough of seeing a face like that on Yuminis, but it's followed me all the way to this era, too.
You means?
No. At this point, it would be more accurate to say he had gone stiff.
They said he had served under you for a time, so I wondered what kind of magus you were. But this, no, comparing you to Yuminis doesn't do it justice. Not even a bit. Of course I didn't expect anything like Ammon's priest or Aristotle, but at this rate it would be better to scoop out what little brains you have and feed them to the wolves.
My master stood in shock. His face looked like he would have preferred to have been struck by that lightning earlier, as if he had just come to realize some truth that would single-handedly take away his happiness. I swallowed.
You sigh.
You finally noticed? Even if you've lost your ability to see their abilities that you had as a master, are you sure your intuition hasn't gone dull? The reason I called you forth was just a whim of mine, but I guess it wasn't worth the effort. Man, what a complete waste of time. I never thought you could have been so disappointing.
She continued to rail against him, but before I could give voice to my anger at that, she acted.
So die.
With that, she kicked off the roof of the train car. With a single step, she had reached my master standing behind me. I was shocked. Her physical ability exceeded even mine after I had collected the surrounding magical energy. Closing the distance between them in an instant, she drew her sword. Master. Turning around, I also stepped toward him, throwing out my right hand.
This is just too much of a development, isn't it?
In an instant, the hook on my right shoulder released, and Ad expanded. His Rubik's Cube-like exterior span rapidly, settling into the shape of a scythe in my hands.
Stems. The scythe caught her sword.
Oh, impressive. You blocked it head on, did you? It seems you're better than the soldiers of Persia.
Who are you? A grinding sound filled the air as her blade pressed down on my scythe. Though her weapon was sharp, it didn't seem to have any special properties as a noble phantasm or conceptual weapon. But as she swung the blade around, it was clear it was no ordinary blade.
Remember this? Having skill in combat does not make one a soldier. Such a becoming is a question of body, mind, and spirit.
I had forgotten that we were on top of a moving train. This woman seemed so out of place, so separated from the present, it made me feel like I was standing on some ancient battlefield. As if being surrounded by magi and the mystici collecting train wasn't outlandish enough. This woman had an overwhelming sense of the supernatural that set her completely apart. What is this? Don't touch, don't approach, don't associate. Even showing interest will be the end of you. Even when confronting the grand-ranked Magus, Tuko Aozaki, that warning had only been a soft insistence. Now it was a violent scream, pleading with me to run away. But retreat wasn't an option. Once again, the woman's sword came down on my scythe. So strong. Her speed and accuracy were terrifying. But more than that, the weight of her repeated strikes was simply unnatural. The shock of the impact traveled straight through the side to the bones in my arms. Each and every swing came with the intention of killing. Soldier, she had said, not just an issue of skill, but of body, mind, and spirit. Then she must have been...
A servant!
The answer came from behind me. That pained shout came, as if he had to wrench out his insides to do it.
Gray! That woman is a ghost liner, the manifestation of a heroic spirit from humanity's history.
A little late, isn't he?
As she laughed, she threw her sword into a horizontal slash. This time, collecting as much magical energy from the area as I could, I kicked off the roof. Matching my timing to the swaying of the train, I slipped through the gap made by her ever so slightly slowed blade, flipping backwards. As I landed, I stumbled backwards. Even with that, her blade still grazed my legs.
Well, now, that's an interesting trick. You absorbed a bit of my magical energy just now, didn't you? A perfect technique to use against me as I am now. Too bad, though, the scope is just too small. Even if you're a cat, you can't catch a mouse 100 times your size. I imagine it would be good enough to wipe out a ghost outright, too.
As soon as she mentioned ghosts, a chill ran up my spine. But for the first time, my fear of the person in front of me took precedence. Gritting my teeth, trying to ignore the cold sweat breaking out, I put power into my legs again. If I hadn't, I would certainly have collapsed. By dropping my focus just a bit, I could feel a sensation like my insides flipping upside down. With that sword, she would have no problem cutting me cleanly in two.
But the master seems hopeless, but the disciple isn't so bad. You seem the type to stay in the kitchen even when you can't handle the heat, but you're holding up quite well. If we hadn't met like this, I might have enjoyed training you myself, but I guess that's that. As a reward, I'll show you something interesting.
She didn't move. All she did was look at me. Heterochromia. Her right eye was as dark as night, while her left was as blue as the daytime sky. As I noticed that, I felt my mind being sucked in by that brilliant blue light. No unnecessary movement. Single action. My body clumsily turned to the side. I could only watch dumbfounded as I saw my arms lift my scythe in the air, pointed toward my own master. Mystic. Eyes. Eyes.
I guess you people would call it a noble color of compulsion. A fitting end to a fight on this stage, don't you think? My god prizes madness. The comedies and tragedies caused by intoxication and drunkenness are to be enjoyed. I had thought watching the master and students slay each other would be entertaining, but looks like one of you has some irritating equipment. It seems the magi of this era are well prepared.
Pressing his glasses to his face, my master stumbled. It seemed the mystic code he had prepared for the Rail Zeppelin was enough to defend against this woman's compulsion. But there was no reason to feel relieved. My body was still being perfectly controlled. My previously clumsy movements were gradually becoming smoother, and the distance between my master and I was shrinking.
Hey!
The scythe came down. On the roof of the train car, red filled the night air. Slicing through only a single layer of leather on my master's shoulder, the scythe spun in an arc, aiming for the woman's throat.
Well, that scythe is quite versatile.
She said, seeing right through me as her sword intercepted the blade coming for her. With the magical energy expelled by the scythe forcibly running through my magic circuits, it flushed the effects of the mystic eyes from my system. Even then, it was a desperate maneuver, and had it been even a few moments late, I would have taken my master's head right off his shoulders.
I guess there's nothing else to do then. I had hoped to let you two settle things yourselves, but I guess not.
Taking a large step back, the woman gave a small sigh. She then raised her sword to the dark clouds above, though it seemed like she acted so arrogant as to think she could cut the sky with her own weapon. The unusual magical energy flooding the blade was impossible to ignore. I won't let you.
Too late,
She said, bringing down the sword with its enormous amount of magical energy. From the empty space before her, something expanded. It looked like she had cut open space itself. Though it seemed that way, it was probably more like materializing a spiritual entity, or some similar phenomenon. Whichever the case, the appearance of the object pushed aside the air in its place, creating a powerful shockwave that threw me backwards. A stinging pain covered my skin. It was the first time I had felt that. My body was starting to reject the enormous amount of magical energy I had absorbed.
No, 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 no. That's not allowed, Gray. Anything but that. Even if it's us, this isn't an opponent we can beat.
Lightning from the dark clouds overhead repeatedly struck around the armored woman, as if in blessing. The lightning-clad form was that of a two-horse chariot. It wasn't a weapon of the modern age. It was an ancient symbol, a vehicle pulled by horses or something similar, running across the battlefield, trampling all underfoot. What? I heard a stunned voice. Of course, that was to be expected. The creatures pulling the chariot were made entirely of bone, and though they were only skeletons, the lizards had powerful-looking wings. Were they small dragons? With no forelimbs, they looked like the long-extinct wyvern, a phantasmal species, watching that chariot drawn by dragons of bone. My master's expression continued to twist.
But that...
Master? But I understood. This was a noble phantasm, the same as the holy spear hidden within Ad, a weapon that surpassed human intellect. But thanks to its terrible nature, I could predict what type of noble phantasm it would be. Before coming to the Rail Zeppelin, Rainey's had told me. He was said to have two noble phantasms. Heaven's Wheel. One, the chariot dedicated to the Gorion Shrine, the Gordius Wheel.
My name is Hephaestion, the closest friend of the greatest king of conquerors in history, Iskandar.
The woman Hephaestion leapt up onto the chariot, took the reins, and the chariot lifted into the air. With a figure that seemed taken straight out of myth, she brought the chariot around in an arc, charging directly toward us. With each step of the skeletal dragons pulling it, lightning boomed. Each strike was as powerful as the lightning that had struck before. A human struck once would, without a shadow of a doubt, be killed instantly. Master! Grabbing a hold of him, I jumped. As we fell to the roof of the train car, I felt a burst of energy pass over my back. The storm trampled down the world. After passing us by, that manifestation of destruction plowed through the forest, throwing trees this way and that as if they were no more than pencils. There was no way it could be stopped. If there was a way, there was only one. As the chariot came around in a wide arc, I slowly lifted Ad up from where I was sitting on my knees. The numerous eyes adorning the scythe opened. The magical energy in the atmosphere was enough. Full throttle. The time to activate its true function was now.
Gray, rave, crave.
No, Gray. If you use it in such an unstable place, we won't make it out either. And she hasn't even released its true name yet.
But... The chariot gradually gained speed, heading toward us. I could no longer... No, at this rate, I wouldn't have made it in time anyways. Slowly, my master stood. He drew out the knife he always used to cut his cigars. I couldn't imagine he hoped to fight a heroic spirit using something like that, but either way I went stiff as I watched him.
Suicide is
No way! As my master stepped forward, the small blade glimmered. His thin frame was drowned out in the chariot and its lightning. The bright lightning was enough to cast out the night, and as powerful as the roaring thunder, a battle cry.
Ya la 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 la.
Fate was decided. The lightning pouring out to the sides of the chariot was unstoppable. Trampled down by dragons of bone, torn apart by the chariot that followed, not a shred of his original form would remain. The force it brought to bear wasn't just an anti-personnel weapon, but was in the range of an anti-army noble phantasm. Even a fully equipped modern army would be annihilated by a single strike, a deafening roar. Like the rampage of a god, the word destruction seemed insufficient to describe it, and in the next moment that attack blew us away. With my vision narrowed down to focus on one single point, everything seemed to move in slow motion. The door to the freight car opened. At last, I realized we had been knocked down to the side of the freight car.
Professor Gray.
Calls. From that open door, calls reached out to us. As we fell, my master and I reached desperately for that hand. As his strengthened hand caught my weight for a single moment, I threw myself into my master. A moment later, I did a half spin, jumping into the freight car. My eyes immediately snapped to the window, where I saw the woman and her chariot flying off into the distance. She's not chasing...
If she hit us here, that would be a declaration of war against the Rail Zeppelin itself, after all. I don't know why, but I guess at the least, her master isn't interested in doing that. That must have been why they picked such a place.
My master muttered weakly as he leaned against the wall, sliding to the floor. He then raised his head with a small smile.
Good timing, Calls.
I was worried. I felt some sort of magical lightning earlier, and when I came to check, you were facing down some sort of monster chariot.
I suddenly realized at that moment. Thanks to his research into primeval batteries, Calls must have become sensitive to the flow of electricity, though I'm sure even my master never would have assumed such a thing would happen.
Thanks. You really saved us.
My master said with a ragged sigh. A small ceramic jar was lying at his feet, already laced with cracks. As it rolled across the floor, the cracks spread throughout until it fell apart.
I wonder, if it hadn't been a direct hit, would the primeval battery have survived?
He gave another deep sigh. At that, Calls blinked in surprise.
Did you cut your hair?
Though it was just a single lock, it seemed some of my master's hair was missing. Finally, I realized the knife earlier hadn't been for fighting the enemy, but for cutting his own hair.
It's a trump card normally used by female magi. If you fill your hair with magical energy, it functions well as a catalyst. After all, I don't have many advantages with this body. There's no point in decking myself out with mystic codes, but I figured 1 or 2 secret weapons would help.
Hold on. Was that the reason he had grown his hair out so long? Amplifying the magecraft of the primeval battery, he misdirected the force of the lightning. But no matter how much lightning he was able to redirect, the difference between him and that chariot was just too much. We had been blown away just by the wind coming off it, before it even hit us. The fact we survived something like that could be nothing less than a miracle. If those skeletal dragons had struck us with a single step, we both would have died.
It seems she took it easy on us. If she had really intended on killing us, something small like this wouldn't have made a difference. But how did she summon that thing? Why? Was there a friend of the king I had never seen?
Professor?
Trying to help my master to his feet, Cole's breath caught. The back of his coat had been thoroughly scorched. That was probably a result of us being blown away. My master must have strengthened his entire body as I had, but there was an insurmountable gap between our capabilities to do so. And if he had been using his magecraft to redirect the lightning, there was no way his arms or magic circuits could have been fully operational for that.
Please keep it quiet. From the staff.
With a faint moan, he began to sway.
Master.
Professor.
Our shouts didn't reach him. Just like that, his swaying body collapsed, falling forward. Chapter 4, Part 1. As we rushed back to our guest room, luckily we didn't come across anyone else. Thanks to the previous murder incident, the other magi must have been staying inside their rooms. As we opened the door to our room, a silver-haired girl turned to look at us.
What is wrong with you leaving me alone right after saying you couldn't leave me alone? Sabreza, what? What's going on?
I'm sorry. Please, get out of the way. Getting to the bed as fast as possible, we laid my master down. As we stripped off his coat and shirt, the smell of burnt flesh filled the room. Resisting the urge to vomit, we used a knife to separate the areas where his clothes had stuck to his skin. While ordinarily we would have called on the staff to get some medical supplies, due to my master's request to keep them uninvolved, our hands were tied. Cause...
I know, my skill in healing magecraft is pretty bad, though.
I immediately passed him off to Calls. Calls immediately laid him on his side so his back wouldn't touch the bed. Putting his hand on a ceramic pot lying near the bed, a faint electricity began to run through him.
That is?
One application of primeval batteries. We had just started researching it in class, though. By using electricity, we stimulate the professor's body's natural healing ability and replenish his ode as much as possible, though I don't know how much of a difference this will actually make. If he had a powerful magic crest, then it would be completely different.
For those with powerful magic crests, no matter what kind of serious injuries they sustained, the crest would forcibly keep its host alive as long as possible. Unfortunately, it was clear my master had no such thing. His breathing was rough and shallow. We could understand just how powerful an attack he had taken just from the way he breathed. Sitting there completely unable to do anything, I felt like my heart was being crushed under the pressure.
Was he attacked by the culprit?
I don't know.
What do you mean? You don't know!
Of course we were attacked, but that seems to be related to our own circumstances. We can't know for sure if they were involved with the attack on Trisha, too. At my straight response, Olga Murray's brow furrowed slightly. Coles alone continued focusing all his efforts on the healing. Within the dark room, the sporadic flashes of electricity felt like images of my master's life slipping away. I dropped to my knees beside him. My heart was beating so loud I felt the others might be able to hear it. The cold sweat wouldn't stop. Like my heart had been struck directly, I couldn't stop the tears from pouring out. I didn't even remember when they had started.
Is he such an important person to you? I thought you weren't even a magus.
Perhaps Calls had explained to her that I wasn't a magus. I'm his disciple. Even if I'm not a magus, I'm his disciple. Whether she accepted that answer or not, she stepped away. After a little while, she pulled something from the bag she had left on the floor.
Then why not try this?
She held out a small, beautiful-looking bottle. Even without the elegant design, I could feel an old magical power coming from within it. What is...
Druidic medicine. It was given to Trisha just in case, but I have no use for it. After all, it's not like it'll make her head grow back. It seems able to cure almost anything, so why not give it a shot?
As she spoke without any sense of urgency, Calls spun around.
Druidic medicine? You mean the perfect panacea spoken of by Pliny the Elder?
You get it, right? With this, Animosphere's debt to El-Melloi is paid in full. If he makes it through this, I expect you to tell him that.
Pushing the bottle on us, she stepped away. Then, with a yawn,
Good night, then.
with a wave, she lay down on one of the beds. Though she gave no signs of actually having fallen asleep, we were too absorbed in the bottle she had handed us to notice. Timidly, I emptied the medicine into my hand and spread it on my master's back. I then tore a section from some sheets nearby, and after boiling them to disinfect them, I wrapped them around his injury. I didn't know how useful it would be. But after waiting for a while, it seemed his breathing had become more stable. Calls. Call is...
I don't know, but I feel like the magecraft is working easier now.
Call's face was gradually turning pale. Having focused on the magecraft for so long, it wasn't just his mental focus, but his physical strength was also under strain. Though I didn't know what that felt like, I knew that the cost would be severe. Please, God, when had I begun praying like that? The sorrowful face of my master when he had heard the heroic spirit herself as Hephaestion was stuck in my head. What had he felt then? To be so ruthlessly attacked by the dear friend of the person he so badly wanted to meet? So, please don't let my master die. In such a sad way. I prayed with my whole heart. Part 2. Sunlight shone in through the window. Piercing through the fog outside, the bright, refreshing morning light finally made me notice the blanket laid over my shoulders. Master.
He's still asleep, but we seem to be past the difficult part. As expected, druidic medicine is really impressive stuff. For now, we're done with the treatment. His condition is still serious, though, so best not to wake him up yet.
Thank you. Instinctively, I bowed my head. Carl's harrowed face seemed to me like that of an angel. Soon after,
Morning.
Olga Mari greeted us, stretching as she sat up in bed. After a brief glance at my master and a muttered, "Guess he didn't die after all," she put her hair roughly in order before turning to Carl.
I figured it was pointless to give that medicine to you since he seemed well past helping, but it looks like you're pretty good. Is healing magecraft your field or something?
Not at all. The professor had just taught me that electric magecraft a few weeks ago, actually.
What? A few weeks ago? What are you, some kind of genius disguised as an idiot?
Well, actually, even the magecraft I've studied for years didn't sit with me as well. I was learning spiritual evocation before, but I just couldn't get a handle on it.
Left it. I'd heard rumors of the El-Melloi classroom before, but...
Narrowing her eyes, she made a difficult expression. With a sigh, she reluctantly turned to us.
Will you tell me more about what happened?
Well, seeing I wasn't sure what to say, Carl spoke up.
It's fine, isn't it, Gray? She's already involved with this after all. And as an Animosphere, she has information about the Holy Grail War, right? Considering the current situation on the Rail Zeppelin, we should really be working together. Once the professor wakes up, I'm sure he'll say the same thing.
Calls gave me a serious look as he spoke. Earlier, I had thought he was out of place at the clock tower, but perhaps I had been wrong about that. Rather, perhaps his ability to completely switch his personality as he was pressed on by the situation at hand was ideal for a magus. Though his sister, who he had replaced as the successor to his family, was supposed to be much more talented than he was, I couldn't imagine her surpassing him in this respect.
Yeah, you owe me for that medicine too.
I thought you said that made us even? At my composed rebuttal, Olga Marie's breath caught. But by that point, I had already made up my mind. Except for the existence of my master's relic, I explained the situation up until now.
A servant? Really? Summoning a heroic spirit that maintains its personality from its lifetime should be impossible outside of the Holy Grail War of Fuyuki. There's no way one would show up in England. Even if there was a method, without that greater grail, that spell wouldn't work.
Borrowing the powers, at least in part, of heroic and divine spirits was certainly a possibility. The faculty of spiritual evocation taught magecraft along those lines. I had been told in a lecture, but a ritual to bring forth a heroic spirit in its entirety was normally impossible.
Well, putting aside whether the spell exists or not, is summoning outside of Fuyuki possible? If it were, it would require authority on the level of the three families.
Closing an eye, Olga Mari muttered to herself. As a habit my master also took part in from time to time. Maybe talking to oneself out loud while thinking something through was common among magi. Perhaps because the first principle of the clock tower was to keep mystery hidden. In detective novels, it was often used with the excuse of them not wanting to share their theories with others while still formulating them. But I felt it was a little different in this case. Once again, Olga Marie asked us,
Was it really a servant? Are you sure?
Well, her noble phantasm was definitely the real thing. My master seemed to recognize it as the same one used by Iskander, and anyways, it was something well beyond what a human should be able to muster. That's right. For a human magus, replicating a noble phantasm was impossible. Last month my master had shown us projection magecraft, but that was only able to reproduce the outward appearance. and even then only for an extremely limited time, to completely reproduce an entire noble phantasm. At the very least, from my lectures in the clock tower, it seemed to be something entirely outside of the scope of possibility. After watching us for some time...
In that case, we can't say it's definitely unrelated to me.
What do you mean?
If there's a servant, that means somewhere there's a master. With the Rail Zeppelin traveling through this closed space, that servant must have used its noble phantasm to track us down. In that case, the chances of that servant's master being on the train itself is extremely high.
At that, I swallowed. Of course, considering we were here pursuing the one who had stolen the relic, it should have been an obvious possibility.
Man, things have gotten rather annoying. So, what kind of servant was it?
She said her name was Haveshja.
Iskander's subordinate.
Do you know her?
There's no way I wouldn't. Hephaestion is the most famous of all of Iskander's followers. As a close friend, he's right at the top. They studied together at Mysa, were both taught by Aristotle, visited the grave of Achilles and Patroclus together, and in the end they both took the daughter of Darius III as wife.
They took his daughters as wives? Feeling like I had heard something strange, I couldn't help but repeat it back.
That's right. It's pretty indisputable stuff.
But, the Hephaestion we met was a woman.
A woman? Well, wouldn't it have been a problem if a woman was set up as a leader in the army? It would have been easier for Iskander if he had just lied about her gender to the generals. Maybe it was something like that. So it's hard to imagine her climbing the ladder so well, just because she was old friends with him. It's possible her exploits just weren't in the records that survived until today.
Of course I knew basic information about Iskandar's life, but knowledge about his subordinates or anecdotes of their lives was something well beyond my knowledge. Though, even if she was a magus, being outclassed by an 11-year-old like this stung a little. At the same time, the idea that he let her into the army, lying about her gender, and somehow pulled the whole thing off without getting caught it, made me wonder exactly what kind of person this Iskander had been.
At any rate, if that was really a Hephaestion, then it goes without saying she'd be able to use the same noble phantasms as Iskander.
Really?
He was another Iskander after all. This is another famous story. At one time when Iskander and Hephaestion visited them, the mother of Darius the Red didn't know which of the two was king. So, she mistakenly bowed before Hephaestion. At that time, such an affront to the king was more than worthy of punishment, but Iskander just laughed it off, saying he's another Iskander. If Hephaestion was really a woman, it's hard to believe that it was just a mistake. So there was probably something else at play. But that anecdote likely sublimated into a noble phantasm itself, for example, letting Hephaestion use the noble phantasms of Iskander, so it's not that strange to think it's possible.
I was speechless. A noble phantasm was the power that served as the symbol of a heroic spirit. Not just a simple weapon or tool, but a legend of what made that hero who they were, manifested as a concept. In a way, it was something engraved even deeper, that a heroic spirit's own name. To be able to use another heroic spirit's noble phantasm without limit, didn't that mean they were truly one and the same person? The fact that someone like that had said she didn't like my master at all, caused a sting in my chest. What did my master feel as he heard those words?
So, I'd also like to ask then, did someone steal the relic for Iskander from you guys?
Once again, I couldn't help going stiff, as if she saw it in my expression. Olgamase crossed her arms with a sigh.
Of course I'd figure it out. In the Fourth Holy Grail War, he summoned Iskandar, right? I don't know what kind of relic he had to do so, but anything that had a strong connection to Iskander would almost certainly have a strong connection to a Hephaestion as well. Rather than someone just happening by chance to summon Hephaestion, it's much more natural to think someone used the same relic.
The girl's conjecture punched right through our negligence. Perhaps that was only ordinary for someone from the family of a lord. I could understand a little better now how Rhaenys had gotten that way. It wasn't just that Rhaenys was born with that kind of talent, but it was a talent that was refined and polished by that environment.
So in short, the person who stole the relic summoned Hephaestion, and that master is now aboard the Rail Zeppelin. The possibility is high. Though I don't know why they summoned Hephaestion instead of Iskandar, or what brought them to the Rail Zeppelin in the first place. But things seem a bit backwards with Hephaestion, don't they?
What is backwards?
I told you we researched the Holy Grail War before, right? Normally, in order to hide a servant's weak points, they do their best to keep their true names hidden. Instead, they call themselves by names based on the class they were summoned into, like Saber or Lancer.
As she descended into thought, she put a finger to her chin.
But this time we know the servant's true name, but not their class. Though judging from the fact she uses Iskandar's noble phantasms, and from her abilities in general, Ryder seems like the safest bet.
You think they are the same?
No idea. It's not like I can trust everything you told me wholesale anyways. But if we assume what you've said is true, then that part alone is strange, which leaves a single problem.
Letting herself be swayed by the movements of the train, she raised a finger. Coles took up on that problem right away.
Whether the culprit of our murder case is Hephaestion's master or not.
Ooh, I'm surprised you get it.
We just don't have enough information to tell. The only clue we have is that they took away her entire head.
At Cole's words, the two of them fell silent. That seemed to be the limit of what we could conclude. Even just following along, my head was overflowing with new information, so I was desperate to get rid of as much of it as possible. The stolen relic of Iskandar, the servant, Hephaestion, the murder incident on the Rail Zeppelin, the missing head of the murder victim, rainbow mystic eyes. I felt like I should have asked more about Iskandar. I should have asked more, without regretting going behind my master's back to do so. I couldn't imagine it being necessary information at this time, but there should have been something we were able to do. I looked back at my master, lying on his side. I wondered what he would have thought. What connection was there between that servant and the murder? How would he analyze them? How would he dissect those situations? It struggled to reach back into my memory. Sight is the first magecraft in human history. Is the first magecraft in human history. Among the 5 senses, sight is the one that provides the most information. Before we had come here, I had had such a discussion with my master. What place did Mystic Eyes have in the history of magecraft? Normally, I'm sure my master would start from there in his search for resolution. There was no way I was smart enough to figure it out on my own. But with Coles and Olgamori beside me, I felt like maybe I could at least find the start of the path. Around and around, around and around, around and around, I dove into my memories, forcing my head to work. Before I noticed that the conversation between the other two had started again, a certain scene began to play in my head. Before I knew it, a question slipped out of my mouth. I wonder, what does prediction mean?
What do you mean?
Just, Miss Tricia said her foresight was predictive. I answered Carl's question as I sifted through that memory. It's like they are a person invisible to time. The words Carabo and my master had shared when they were inspecting Tricia's body stuck out like a thorn. After my vague explanation, Carls closed his eyes for a while.
Because they are limited by the functions of the human body, foresight and hindsight both come in 2 forms, those being predictive and determinative. Predictive is exactly like it sounds. Like if we saw a ball on a hill, we could predict that it would roll down it. It's an extension of that basic principle. It's a phenomenon possible when the person using the ability has a tremendous ability to remember and calculate. But because that process would be greatly hindered by the personality of the person using it, it mostly happens entirely unconsciously.
In other words, it's like normal imagination?
The logic is the same, but in this case, the amount of memory and number of calculations taking place unconsciously are far beyond what an ordinary human can handle. Fundamentally, our bodies have been optimized by the process of evolution. Even if magi are humans with a tendency toward the past, their bodies are still the same format as every other human. So, even if the logic is the same, the amount of memory and calculative ability required creates a process that far exceeds what humans can handle. For example, I have a decent grasp of the impression of this place.
I know the three people's names and their faces. I know we're in a luxurious private room aboard a train. I can grasp things in a wider scope, like the positions of beds and tables or the periodic movements of the train. But when it comes to predictive foresight, fine details like the color of light,
The individual intonation of each sound in our voices, the second-to-second movements of our eyes, the gradual changes in our body, odors, or the shade and color of the fog outside are all recorded, and the calculations are made together with the knowledge of the environment and the people within them to create an image of a single world. Even unconsciously, that level of information is enough to fry your brain.
Memory and calculations.
I thought through what Cole said. Though the amount of information was more than someone like I could handle, it still gave me a bad feeling. After thinking about it for a while, I realized what was bothering me.
But then, isn't that more something for the brain to do, rather than the eyes?
It varies from case to case, but from the perspective of magecraft, eyes have their own kind of magic circuits. Those are capable of holding that kind of memory and performing those kinds of calculations on their own.
Now that he mentioned it, I remembered hearing that magic circuits could be used like a kind of computer for recording and storing information. Perhaps mystic eyes, operating under predictive foresight, use the same principle?
In contrast, determinative foresight is much stranger. The same kind of memory and calculative power is required, but while predictive foresight is a passive defensive process, determinative foresight is an assertive, in a way, an offensive one.
Assertive?
Yes, assertive in that it makes the future work for it. Basically,
Thinking for a bit, Coles looked around the room. Taking a notebook from the table nearby, he drew a shape on the paper. What's this?
it's a diagram of time. It's easy enough to understand that the future is made up of a wide spread, right?
As Coles drew on the page, I gave a small nod. In short, they were choices. Whether to take the cup in front of you with your left hand or your right hand, the uncountable number of choices like that made up what we conceptually referred to as the future. In the same way, from the single point on Coles' diagram that represented the present, countless lines stretched forward to represent the future.
Before, I told you that predictive foresight used as much data as possible from the past and present to predict what was possible in the future. In comparison, determinative foresight seeks to determine of which of those possible futures will occur, or even is used to decide which one will come to pass. In order to do that, the user attempts to limit the choices of others.
Deciding yourself whether to take the cup with your left hand or right hand, as a result, restricting the responses and actions of the world around you. So the meaning of determinative foresight was acting yourself to determine which future would come about, in short, calculating how one would do so. As he explained, it was completely different from predictive foresight. Even though they were both called foresight, they were as different as fire and water.
This difference in logic means that determinative foresight is many times more accurate than predictive foresight. Though it seems like you can only see the future of the place you happen to be in at that moment, once it's been decided, that future is completely fixed. You could say their ability to restrict the future in that regard is absolute.
Tale Studio, please subscribe to our channel if you enjoy listening. I felt a definite sense of dread hiding within those words. If someone had eyes like that, I wondered what kind of life they would lead, passing each day, just blindly acting along a script they already knew, completely bereft of free will, a slave to the future they've already seen. Who was it that decided on that future, the eyes, or the one who bore them? As those thoughts ran through my imagination, I nodded again. I understand, I think, and hindsight is the same.
Yes. Though when it comes to hindsight, the distinction between predictive and determinative is basically irrelevant. Most people who use them don't seem to make the distinction either.
I see.
Let me draw that too. Compared to the infinitely expanding future, the past is like a mountain of sand.
Below the countless lines that depicted the future, Coles drew a mountain made of tiny grains of sand. From a distance it looked sort of like a funnel. Countless paths from the future stretched toward the present, where a single path was chosen. Pressed down into a single grain, it then fell onto the mountain of grains beneath it, called the past. Is that what time is like?
One at a time, the grains of the future slip through the present, before falling onto the mountain that is the past. With a diagram like this, In the same way entropy works in a three-dimensional space, the idea of time following its own vector should be easy to understand.
The flow of time. Entropy. Almost like an hourglass, moment by moment, the future became the present, and the present became the past. Unstoppable by anyone, uncontested by anyone, the single direction chosen by the universe.
Whether predicting the past based on the results evident in the present, or calculating it based on one's own current perspective, the process is more or less the same. If I were to guess, I'd say calculating it based on your current perspective would narrow the scope and thus improve the accuracy.
Though determinative foresight held the dreaded implication of determining a fixed future, since the past was already fixed, its equivalent in hindsight wasn't nearly as menacing. After saying all that, Coles added one more thing as if apologizing.
That said, neither of them are able to actually see the past, so according to both modern magecraft and quantum theory, the past itself is also uncertain. Some people make that argument. What we imagine as the past is nothing more than memory and records. They would say, "Sorry, my classes haven't gone any farther than that."
And no, that's enough. For a moment, it felt like I was getting another lecture from my master. I glanced over to where my master was lying. Even if he were gone, the things he's cultivated wouldn't disappear. Thinking that, I felt a little better. Seeing that our conversation was finally over, the abandoned and bored Olga-Marie snorted.
So, what of it?
Just, my master said something about that the culprit was invisible to both foresight and hindsight like he was invisible to time. Now that I thought about it, that conversation happened while she was unconscious.
Invisible to time?
Is there someone who understands that a bit better?
If it's about mystic eyes, Yvette might know about it more in detail.
As he spoke, an announcement echoed throughout the Rail Zeppelin. An announcement like ice stabbing into my brain. Part tra.
Rodin, sir.
A low sound reverberated, filling the entire car, beyond numerous pressure gauges and valves, braking levers and water levers, came the dull sound of iron and burning coal. This was the one place that guests were not permitted the control room of the Rail Zeppelin. In reality, the majority of the train was run on magical energy, but this imagery of an old-fashioned steam locomotive was common throughout the vehicle. The previous owner had taken quite a liking to the aesthetic. Alternatively, perhaps it was the dead apostle. Though they had long since surpassed the limits of humanity in their abilities in magecraft, the dead apostle known by the auctioneer still had an affection for vestiges of humanity.
Are the preparations complete, Leandra?
Yes. The Mystic Eye Depository's contents have been confirmed. We will be able to continue without delay.
Excellent. What is the main attraction this time?
I don't know. As always, the manager's representative alone knows which is which.
Just as when the previous owner was in charge, the details of the eye catches of the auction weren't told to the staff. The only exception was when the bearer of those eyes refused to come forth, or, after receiving an invitation, refused to board the train.
In those situations alone, the owner's representative would inform them of their identity. The fact they hadn't been told anything meant that the bearer was already aboard the Rail Zeppelin. Or, possibly, that they would be boarding later today. While it was a bizarre custom, it was one Rodin and Leandra had grown used to. The only concern that remained for them was to make sure the previous owner's Mystic Eye auction continued unabated. For those who took pride in running that system, the prospect of doubting it never would have crossed their minds. Even now, the owner's memory lingered in their hearts. That memory would surely remain as an unfading rose, until the last of them died out, until the last gear of the Rail Zeppelin wore down to dust. That was the kind of person they stood in support of.
What do you make of the murder?
While it is unfortunate for the guests, it's hardly abnormal.
I guess so. About once every 5 years now.
For those who weren't confident in their financial strength for the auction, the removal of troubling opponents by force was hardly an uncommon tactic. If one thought of the incident as another one of those, it wasn't out of the ordinary in the least. As far as the bizarre method of killing, by removing the entire head, when it came to the Rail Zeppelin, That too wasn't especially surprising.
Apparently, the victim possessed mystic eyes of foresight. Should someone come forward requesting they be transplanted? What do you plan to do?
Of course, if it's one of our guests, we will provide whatever care is necessary.
The same as always, then.
The same as always.
Life or death, he received all of them the same way. It was an auction started for the pleasure of the previous owner. If the owner didn't tell them to stop, they had no place to force the morals of human society into the mix. As if it was nothing more than she expected, the auctioneer nodded before changing the subject.
By the way, it seems things got rather heated last night.
That uninvited guest?
It went without saying that the conductor could tell the lightning they had witnessed the night before was not a natural phenomenon, even while within the closed space of the Rail Zeppelin, or rather because they were in it. Such coincidental occurrences should have been prevented.
However, it appears they did not have hostile intentions toward us. As long as it does not hinder the operation of this train, I have no intention in getting involved with the personal affairs of the guests. Of course, that all changes should we receive instructions from the representative.
Of course.
At Roden's declaration, the auctioneer gave her affirmation as well. As they had mentioned to Gray earlier, they had hardly ever met their current employer, and even those meetings had been like viewing a mirage on the horizon over the sea. Though they had run the system that was the Rail Zeppelin alone for all this time, that made their sense of loneliness all the more severe. For a time, the sound of steam was the only thing heard in the control room. Eventually, the auctioneer spoke again.
What's wrong, sir?
There is an anomaly on the tracks.
But having worked with him for so long, the auctioneer could tell. The bone-thin conductor's face was drawn with a distress she never would have imagined on him in the worst situation.
It's difficult to believe, but someone has done something to the tracks. It seems we will be grazing against a child of Inash.
Staring hard at the pressure gauges before him, the conductor took the microphone in hand. Electing to avoid the dining car, his Shiri Adashina had requested room service. She had confirmed that the viewing of today's selection of Mystic Eyes would happen after the new guests had boarded. With the murder incident earlier, there was no need to spend any more time with the others than absolutely necessary, while eating the bare minimum of hors d'oeuvre to stay healthy.
Really, the previous owner was a terrible person.
As an auction meant just to show off their collection of Mystic Eyes, trapping the Magi in a secretive closed space was going too far. Beyond just avoiding boarding the train until the day before the auction, murdering the opponents you couldn't outbid was expected of Magi. In short, in addition to showing off their collection, it seemed the auction was also set up to enjoy the mortal conflict among the Magi bidding on it. Hishiri could well feel how the ideals of the gathered Magi had been condensed together in this crucible of greed. In that respect, maybe the killing of Animasphere's servant is reasonable? Even if they were in a closed space, and it would be difficult to pinpoint the culprit once that space had been opened, going so far as to kill the blood relative of a lord and the successor no less was a step too far. Killing the servant would be enough intimidation for an 11-year-old girl. The culprit may have thought so. Why done it? From the beginning, Hishiri had no interest in pursuing the culprit, so any more speculation than that was unnecessary. It was simply a reflexive response to try and put the situation in order, drilled into her by her daily life. It was little more than instinctively calculating the answer when one saw a simple addition formula. That was just how members of the Faculty of Law operated. Hishiri traced a finger down her own neck, the entire head removed, a future that Trisha couldn't see, even with her foresight, though she didn't know which she possessed. If her foresight was predictive, then it wouldn't see through an abrupt occurrence. But, for a time, Ishiri stared up at the ceiling. "We have an announcement to make for our guests." The broadcast came over the speakers.
Special Gemario, Spinera's zombie cooking on a train. Let's enjoy cooking some zombies to a crisp together today.
His narration echoed through the dining car. With his white hat fluttering in the air, he danced beneath it in his stylish white suit. Just as he did when he was doing a performance, he projected the image of a shotgun he couldn't possibly have hidden into the brains of his viewers, and began blasting haphazardly around the room.
This time, all we have to do is eat. No cooking required. How relaxing! First of all is this phenomenal-looking carpaccio. These anchovies in balsamic vinegar have quite the punch. Oh, ho! That looks like quite the rose wine. We'll have to shotgun that. Go ahead and scream for me, audience.
With a smooth turn, he scooped up some of the beef carpaccio, shivering at the flavor. While the preparation was fairly simple, the ingredients were superb. The rose wine itself had a freshness, a mellowness that made one feel like they were ascending to heaven.
Hey, AD, hurry up and send out more zombies. If it's 1 star, I'll bash in their head. 3 stars, and I'll blow out their heart with my shotgun. And if it tastes bad, I'll mash it into the chef and kill them both.
Play? Okay, Mr. Gennaro, here you go.
From the side, a zombie puppet suddenly appeared, using one hand to plant a chop directly into the zombie puppet's head. He used the other to catch his falling hat on a finger gun, all in one smooth motion.
Crush the brain, sever the head, and as a bonus, serve the heart. Zombie Cooking Train Edition has concluded.
With a short tap dance on top of his chair, he brought the show to a close. The applause from his audience of one filled the train car.
Wow, what an honor to see zombie cooking live like that.
I'll send you an invitation to our live recording sometime, so please come again. I'll be waiting for you, my eye-patched pink-haired zombie assistant.
With a wink that looked like it needed a sound effect, Gennaro offered his own praises to the eye-patched girl sitting across from him, Yvette Lehrman.
Joking? I'll be waiting for that big fat check at the end.
As long as you use that mystic eye on our idiot producers.
The girl chuckled. Sitting at the table, she began piling breakfast foods onto her plate as she changed the subject.
So, are you looking for any mystic eyes in particular, Gennaro? The ones we saw yesterday seemed pretty impressive.
That's right. In the end, they were headed toward an auction. The killing of a single servant would hardly throw that off course. With new guests arriving today, she wanted to get a grasp on the intentions of the serious bidders that had arrived on day 1.
What if I told you? Aren't we opponents in this auction? It's not like we can split our winnings.
No. I'm not interested in getting mystic eyes transplanted at all. After all, I've already got something like this. Ta-da! Lehrman's artificial mystic eye Tilda.
From behind the eye patch that she lifted, a glittering jewel peeked out. Not an eye with the rank of jewel, but the actual thing. Manufacturing jewels into high-ranking mystic eyes was the secret art of the Lehrman family.
Thoughtful.
I'm only interested in mystic eyes for research. I'm only interested in mystic eyes for a weezer. So once you've bought what you want, even if you want to wait for a bit, coming to our place so we can study it after the transplant is more than enough for us. I think there's plenty of room for us to work together.
This was different than the conversation he had had with Hishiri. As a deal between individual magi, for someone like her who was likely working at the behest of the Faculty of Law, there wasn't really any room to negotiate.
Willie? That Animosphere girl is still technically wielding the authority of a lord. She might try and just scoop up everything herself.
Though they couldn't expect much from the struggling El-Melloi family, both Animosphere and the Faculty of Law had ample funds to attempt for a clean sweep. If that was the case, they would need to be able to spin on a dime, maneuvering together to secure any sort of powerful mystic eyes that they were looking for. That was the tactic of Yvette, whose only interest was in a subject to study, not in any particular set of mystic eyes.
Not a bad idea.
Curious? And what about you, old man? If you're selling, is there anyone you're hoping will buy?
Not particularly. I'm not that interested in the money anyways.
Waving a hand at the old man sitting apart from them, Karabo answered with a taciturn shake of his head. At that moment,
Will!
The announcement played through the room's speakers. part cat. We have an announcement to make for our guests. The broadcast came over the speakers. The Rail Zeppelin has been diverted from its intended course. At current estimates, we will be entering a child of Anish in approximately 30 minutes. The conductor's composed voice rang in the air. The meaning of that announcement was then made clear. With our sincerest apologies, we must ask that each guest take measures to assure their own safety until the time of the auction.
What?
In short, we're going somewhere terribly dangerous. Good luck. You probably won't be safe even in the train, just so you know. Not just me, but both Coles and Olga Marie wore shocked expressions. It was an entirely impossible to predict scenario. Even just to think that the Rail Zeppelin itself would suffer such a diversion. Is this the culprit's work? Or something to do with her digestion?
I don't know. For all we know, they are the same person. But it seems this isn't just a murder incident anymore.
With a clunk, the train lurched to the side. Clinging to the headboard of her bed, Olga Marie's expression changed as she pointed outside.
Look!
As we followed her finger, Coles and I both caught our breath. It's snowing. Mixed with the fog from before, it had begun to snow. In moments, the gently falling snow became a violent blizzard. Like the silvered breath of God, the intensity continued to mount. Was this a result of the child of Anish the announcement had mentioned? With the entire situation suddenly turned on its head, it was clear this was no case of a simple false report. A grinding sound filled the room. The sound of teeth.
So according to that announcement, we just need to survive until the auction.
Miss Olga Marie.
Just so you know, I'm not your ally or anything. Animosphere's debt to you has already been repaid.
Standing up, she began to leave. With a wave of her silver hair.
I'll do it myself. I'm fine on my own. No! It'll be easier if I'm alone. Trisha taught me how to fend for myself well enough. But more importantly, can you really keep him safe through this?
Turning around, she settled her gaze on the bed. I couldn't answer. All I could do was watch as she left the room. It was just like she said. The murder incident, the auction, even the attack from that servant all seemed suddenly distant. If the announcement was correct, we would be barreling straight into hell, and my master, Lord El-Melloi II, was still so injured as to be unconscious. All I could do was stand there in shock. Interlude. Let us turn the clock back slightly. The day before, the second day Gray and her companions spent on the Rail Zeppelin. In the lobby of Norwich's main building on Slur Street, a furious voice rang out.
Whatever, just get out of my way. The only one I need to speak to is Rhaenys El-Melloi Arcasorda.
That's a lot of blood, Rhaenys thought with a scowl as the guest began to vomit. That was someone who would vomit blood from only a little exertion. Stand, vomit. Walk, vomit. Run, they'd look like a blood-stained zombie. While it looked fine enough from the outside, without hematopoietics, he'd be dead within a day. To be honest, at this point she just wanted to pretend she wasn't around, but it seemed that wouldn't work. After a while, the young man burst through her door, violin case in hand.
Miss! What is going on here?
First of all, sir, please clean that up.
Offering only a cold reception, Rhaenys tidied up the documents she had been looking over. About a third of the work of the Lord came to her like this. When her brother wasn't around, that number jumped to basically 100%, so it typically left her in a desperate situation. And even though she technically had the time for this was someone she didn't want to give even a second to.
I think it's in danger. I'm afraid my brother is absent. If you would like to leave a message, I would be happy to take it for you.
No, not that. Why did my good friend Waver not tell me he was going to the Rail Zeppelin?
'Cause it's none of your business, probably.
No! As the person responsible for your source crest, and since you're using his body as collateral, no, just because I'm his friend, you have an obligation to tell me that much. That's why I told you that Waver was acting strange.
Puffing himself up, he struck his chest with a fist apparently too hard, as it sent him into a coughing fit. So you're the one who gave him the money to make it to Japan for the Fourth Holy Grail War, she thought, though she didn't say anything. For someone as inexperienced and friendless as her brother had been at that time, it was impressive how much that decision had changed the course of the entire clock tower's history. To think that the history of magecraft was completely changed over the decision of whether to buy a ticket or not was enough to make one laugh. But the rest of history was like that too, wasn't it? That's right. At this point, this was the only person who called him Waver. The reason he hadn't been completely crushed when he took over the El-Melloi classroom back then was this man alone. His name was Melvin Wines. He was the same age as her brother at around 30. His colourless white hair and eyelashes gave the impression of an albino. With his pale blue eyes and frustratingly well-put-together features, he likely would have stood out even as a movie star. And on top of all of that, he belonged to a branch family of one of the 3 great aristocratic families. If it hadn't been for his naturally weak body, who knows how far above his current position of Hafiz, ranked tuna he would have reached.
Unfortunately, even I was only informed he was attending the Rail Zeppelin a few days ago. At any rate, a single invitation to that train only permits 2 attendants. Apparently he selected 2 of his students this time, so as you can see, I've been quite busy with paperwork.
In that case, it can't be helped. I'll just have to go alone.
You? Alone? Oh, you are...
Yes! While I couldn't go for the Holy Grail War or those other recent incidents due to my condition, I've been feeling better recently. I should have no problem going out for a few days.
He flashed his brilliant white teeth. At the same time, he showed off a white envelope proudly.
Of course, my family went to all extremes to acquire an invitation to the Rail Zeppelin. Even by myself, I must go see Waver's sobbing face for myself.
That's right. This man was certainly Waver's friend, but that didn't necessarily mean he was Waver's ally. If that were the case, he never would have sent her brother off to participate in something as dangerous as the Holy Grail War. In a way, he was a greater intellectual criminal than even Rhines, and a greater prankster than even Flat.
So, let's hurry. The sooner the better, the starting bell has already rung.
With a bright voice, the young man Melvin made his grand declaration. Outside the window, a helicopter he must have called, whipping up a powerful wind, floated into view. Afterward, a single look was like a poisoned arrow. That circulating poison was the essence of night, the love of heroes, the death of a great god. All as those eyes wished, mystic eyes. That alluring gadget starred in the opening work of the world of Type Moon. As long as it lives, even if it's God himself, I can kill it. Those mystic eyes of death perception, borne by the main characters of Tsukihimen and Kara no Kyokai, fascinated many a reader. That was the rebirth of a myth, wasn't it? It would be no exaggeration to say the evil eye was the oldest magic of humanity, and in that moment it gained new life. Even after 10 years with my own work, Rental Magica, the lure of Mystic Eyes still pulls me strongly. That's why the setting of the Mystic Eye collecting train was always one I quietly hoped would make it into the Lord El-Melloi II's case files. Fortunately, since I had no plans to write it in another work, should it fail to make it into this one, I was able to make it happen. In Volume 1, I had said no one else planned on writing anything about Lord El-Melloi II. But didn't he show up as the main character in some FGO event? Adults don't lie. They are just ever so rarely wrong. After that, all I can say is that there are no plans. From here on out, there will be a few spoilers. From the beginning, I had hoped these case files would serve as a way to connect the old Type Moon with the new, but I feel like that came across stronger in this work. The Rail Zeppelin itself was also the same, but the woman that showed up in the latter half was someone modelled after the Fourth Holy Grail War Kinoko Nasu had vaguely drawn up even before giving the task of writing it to Gen Yorobuchi. Beyond her gender, the idea of her chariot being drawn by a species of dragon was also part of the original idea. Of course, there are some necessary changes that will have to happen. From now on, I will have to do that myself. With Coles and Olga Marie, and even Waver's close friend that Ryan's alluded to a few times coming in at the end, With how much weight has been built up behind the scenes with the setting of the clock tower, I feel like I've barely been able to put a tenth of it on the page. End of spoilers.
Keeping pace with a unique character like Lord El-Melloi II feels like carefully examining a terribly old, terrifyingly thick magic tome page by page. No man is an island, but especially in his case, he is wrapped up in so much thanks to the position of Lord being forced on him.
If we just lined up the things he should know, and the people he should recognize by virtue of him being a lord, I wonder how far that spiderweb would stretch. My wish is that this novel will help unravel that mystery, while maintaining an enchanting tale. The series has sort of reached a turning point here. With this, the second half of Lord El-Melloi II's case files will begin. Please look forward to watching as Lord El-Melloi, along with Gray, Flat, and the rest of the El-Melloi classroom, come to terms with the new incidents they will be facing. Finally, I would like to share my appreciation for Mechi Sakamoto for coming up with so many new character designs for me. Kiyomu Miwa for courteously investigating and explaining the complicated matters of magecraft for me, Yuichiro Higashii and Hikateri Sakurai for working with me on the minor adjustments to the characters of Calls and Olga Marie that appeared in their many works, Ryoga Narita, and finally Kinoko Nasu, OKSG, and the rest of the staff at Type Moon. I hope to see you again this winter, June 2016, while playing Witch on the Holy Night. P.S. Some particularly avid fans of Type Moon may have noticed a typo in the kanji for the name Mystic Eye Collecting Train. This change was an intentional, stylistic choice. Please think of it as just a weird Japanese translation.